Welcome to Chautauqua People. I'm Nancy Barger, and my guest is an old friend who I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to bring all of you up to date on what she's been doing. Hi, Mary Lee Talbot.
Hey, Nancy.
The Reverend Mary Lee Talbot, PhD. As I'm sure many people tell you, it's hard to really imagine how you can accomplish as much as you have. And
oh, thank you.
I'd like to cover a couple of things in the half hour we have together.
Sure.
Beginning with your education is impressive, starting at the College of Worcester. And you also did undergrad, like high school in Ohio?
No, I did high school in Pennsylvania, Greenville.
In Greenville. Okay, gotcha. And then you went on to get a master's at the Andover Newton Theological School.
Master's of Divinity.
And as I read, you had a little hiatus there. And
yes.
What prompted you to want to go back and get your doctorate?
It just felt like the right time and right thing to do. And I started out thinking I would get a doctorate of education, and things happened with my job and things changed, and I thought, no, I'm going to go for the PhD. So I switched to the PhD and got another master's along the way, and finally got my PhD in 1997.
From Columbia? From
Columbia University, yes.
And I also understand these are the little things you learn that you didn't know about your old friend. You were tapped to be in the Educational Honor Society, which is called... can't even remember.
It's been so long. I have not been active
only
in that
20% of people in your field have that honor. So I guess I would just say, to me, it felt like when you moved back here, you were primed to do something that you ended up doing, and that was to run for the school board. I think it's of extreme interest to all of us who either are now paying taxes at Chautauqua Institution, are homeowners, or have in the past, to know that we have people making decisions on the school board who are educated in education and know something about that. So you didn't win the first time. What?
I did not. I decided sort of on the spur of the moment. I went with a good friend, Laura Damon, she had been covering the school board and the county legislature, and I went with her to the school board and I just fell in love with it, and so she left it to me to be the public there, and so I decided to run. And the first time around I lost by only 16 votes, and if that wasn't encouragement to say there must be something here. So for the next, I lost again the next year, and I kept going as the public. Sometimes I was the only public in the room, but
because other people had attachments, they had children in the school, or
they were teachers, or they were the principals, or they were the school board members, but very few, unless it had something to do with football, and I've found this since, most people don't come unless there's an issue, there's a problem. But it helped me as someone who had not been around this particular group of people for a long time to get a sense of what the issues were, but also to get a sense of where the thinking was going with this group. And I liked the fact that the superintendent and the people on the board were trying to think outside the box. We're trying to think proactively in a county where we've got, we're losing population. We have 18 school districts. Some schools very proud that they graduated 35 kids, but how long can you sustain a high school with 35 kids in a class? So I'm delighted to be with a group of people that want to think ahead about where are we going to go and how are we in Chautauqua County going to solve this issue and not have to react to something that Albany sends down. I think that's something we all share, that you know, we probably know more about this county than Albany does, and maybe we could suggest some ways that we could solve these issues that make sense to us.
Being so far away from our state capital.
Yes.
And I remember those days of Laura coming to Mayville and going to the legislature meetings.
Yes.
So I can imagine that she needed somebody to take over at the school board meetings.
And it was just one of those things that I was looking for some way I could give back to the community, and it clicked.
And
This
now
is
you've
where I
been
needed to be.
been elevated to vice chair of the board?
I am vice president of the board, and we have elections again on Wednesday. And I hope they will re-elect me.
This coming Wednesday?
This coming Wednesday.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry if I
No, we have a reorganization meeting every year, and,
Okay.
and I
Oh, you mean officer election?
Yeah, officer
Oh, that
election.
makes
No,
me
no.
feel better.
No, no,
'Cause
no.
Your opponent might say they need equal time.
Oh, no.
No.
We've already had, the elections were in May. We've already had that. It's just a matter of electing the officers.
Good.
So I fully expect to be reelected.
And the experience is what you expected, or obviously, I think some people, it's not what they expect because they feel so dominated by Albany and that they feel the decisions aren't enough
Well,
to make.
I think those 3 years sitting in the public helped me understand how you have to make the most of the wiggle room you've got, and that there is a lot in education that we can't solve, or that we can't regulate. I shouldn't say that. It's not that we can't solve it, we can't regulate it. And so where we see the wiggle room, and the nice thing about having smaller schools still is that we're able to deal with children as much as individuals as possible in a public school system. So that helps.
In urban areas, a school board is often a platform for higher office. In rural areas, you don't see that very much.
It is service. And I got myself elected to the County School Board Association this year, so I'll be
congratulations.
on their executive committee for the next 2 years.
Great.
To see.
I also wanted to ask you about an experience that you had in Rwanda a couple of years ago.
Yes.
What were you doing there?
I work for a nonprofit called People Helping People International, started by a Chautauquan, Bob Evans, who wanted to do a 501c3 similar to Kiva, but he has some other objectives for.
Explain what Kiva is.
Kiva is a crowdfunding site where people for as little as $25 can make a loan to a person.
How do you spell it?
Kiva.
Okay.
But People Helping People works basically in Rwanda with a microloan company called Preferred Microloan Finances in Kigali, and an agricultural processing limited that works with farmers growing maize. And we're trying to help particularly groups of women come together and get capital so they can increase their own livelihood, sort of moving from $1 to $2 a day to $2 to $3 a day,
Increments.
to be able to buy food, to pay for school fees, and to pay for health insurance. You know, we complain about our taxes for school fees, but if you had to pay for your child's education yourself, there's no way a lot of us could do that.
I heard that.
So I was there. Rwanda is still recovering from the genocide in 1994. It was a beautiful, beautiful place, wonderful people, and they are under the leadership of a president, Paul Kagame, who really is the driving force that keeps things steady and moves the country forward.
Great. So that's my segue into the main reason we wanted you today, which is to talk about your latest project. It's not the first time you've written a book.
No.
You wrote one on the history of the Bird Tree and Garden Club. And I'm sure made lots of contacts, and people liked it, or that you wouldn't have been asked to do this one. I know my own Chautauqua Literary Scientific Circle graduating class, my alumni association, was underwriting you a bit. That came up at our annual meeting. Should we use some of our money to make sure that your book was published? And it was supported by everyone. In about, well, let's see, the first week of August, you'll have another graduation of what I am totally guilty of perpetuating a falsehood, as I understand it, that the Chautauqua Literary and Scientific Circle is not the oldest continuous book club in America. Maybe you can set the record straight.
It is not. It was never founded as a book club. First of all, it was founded as a correspondence course to teach adults, people who were past the age of going to college, and that was about 95% of the population in 1878. The opportunity to get a college student's outlook on life, to sample a variety of educational courses. There had been correspondence courses before. Vincent had acquired William Rainey Harper, who was the founding president of Chicago University, who had taught Hebrew by correspondence courses to ministers, and he was part of the Chautauqua schools for many years. But what Vincent wanted was for adults at home to be able to have this education, and they touted it as reading for 40 minutes a day. Now we think of that and we think, well, gee, anybody can read for 40 minutes a day. But when you have to do the wash, the laundry, all the baking, all the cooking, cleaning things, to find 40 minutes a day for an adult was really hard. But people did it. People signed up. And over the years, we're still counting the alumni. My alumni class has taken on a project of finding all the names of the graduates that we can. And
how could that be lost? How would
for many years they were printed in the Chautauquan magazine, and then in about 1895 or 6 they decided that they would stop publishing it in the magazine and put it in a separate booklet, and we have about 6 years until around 1903, they started putting it in the Chautauquan Daily again, the numbers of graduates. By then, the number of graduates had fallen off, but in the 1880s, there were as many as 10,000 graduates in a class.
That sounds very ambitious on the one hand. On the other hand, with the internet the way it is, it seems like even Facebook and other things could be helpful resources to locate some of these descendants.
It might be. The descendants, we don't know. Since we don't know who they were, looking for descendants is is sort of a needle in the haystack. There are a couple. I think the resources are there, but from 1903 on, for the next 115 years, we've got most of the names, and the Office of Education has started putting together their own list going back a number of years, and so we're going to work with them to combine the two lists so there'll be one full list of that. But to say that it is still a structured reading course. This is not a book club where the members get to decide what they're reading. You still have to read 12 books a year. One of the questions that is up for discussion is maybe we should ask people to read more in this day and age.
I have a confession. I was working at the main gate the year of 1978, And I kind of got strong-armed into, we want lots of people in this centennial class. And I was living a very busy life, but I agreed to do it, and I was one of those people who went through the list and tried to find all the books that I'd already read. And fortunately, I didn't have to supplement it with too many new books, but I didn't feel like I did it the proper way, and I never walked through the no, never walked.
Well, you could do that.
I know I can. I'm waiting for the right opportunity, but
you should.
I've watched others do it. My parents graduated, and yeah. Oh, that's
so
good.
that's why it's not a book club per se. It's still a structured reading course, and you can read anything on the list from 1878 on,
which is lovely.
Yeah.
It's just the way reading tastes have changed.
Yeah.
Through the ages, it's very
that's one of
interesting.
the things that I found fascinating.
So a couple of years ago, someone asked you, would the banners be in this book? So I couldn't wait until tonight. I went over to the bookstore this afternoon and peeked.
Yes.
And so how did the decision finally get made?
Well, we intended to have all of the banners in the first edition. Luckily we sold out of the first printing. We're in our second printing now. But we couldn't do the second printing until we had the banners up through 2017. So those are now all in the book.
Oh.
So it is up to date as of 2017.
So
all
one
the
more time,
banners.
the first edition did not have them?
We did not have from 2013, 14, 15 and 16, we didn't have the banners, and the 17, when we published the book, the 17 banner hadn't been revealed
Created,
yet.
yeah.
So before, we ran out of books in the middle of August last year, but we decided that we weren't going to do another printing until we had all of the photos of all of those banners, and Helen Hobenick does that and does a beautiful job.
Oh, Helen.
And
Yes.
so when she was ready and we got them set on a page, then I could just send the page to our designer, and he inserted the new page from the old page. So.
I'm taking a risk here, but is Lois Minig in your book at all?
Of course.
Oh my goodness. Lois used to come into my office and just, I mean, she was on a mission that those banners were going to be preserved.
Yes.
And she kept coming into the development office, insisting that we had to be raising money to preserve those, and we had to look for sources of money, and she was strapped for helpers, and she was so charged up about it, and she succeeded, right?
Well, she sort of bowed out of that. The people who really, there's a whole list of people in there who got behind that effort and found the money, found the preservationists, found we've been schooled in how to put the banners to bed. We have a disaster plan in case they get wet. Last year, for instance, unbeknownst to the workmen at the institution, when they had closed down Alumni Hall, somebody had left the end cap off the sprinkler system, and they turned it on for the summer, and there was this huge flood. And we had about 10 banners that did get wet, but we got all the fans in on them, got them dried, and they were fine. But because we had a plan, we knew what to do. But we have to keep retiring. We've retired all the ones that really had just become frayed.
What means retire? You put it in the attic?
No, we put them on chloroform sheets and store them in the archives. There's a basement room in the archives. This afternoon was one of the tours, and Charlotte Crittenden usually will do another tour closer to Recognition Day, like the Monday before Recognition Day. So you can go in and see all the older banners that can't, some of them just can't hang any longer, some of them because there's no one left from the class to take them out on Recognition Day. They've been retired, so they're put well to bed and preserved.
That's good. I wanted to ask you, it's a big anniversary this year of the the organization, right? The 140th. And are they going to do anything special that you know of?
Nobody said anything.
Yeah,
No.
that's a big one.
Yeah.
But also coinciding, as I've heard you say elsewhere, that this was so empowering for women to have access to these opportunities to read. And it's this anniversary of women's right to vote and getting the vote. It's interesting how they come together.
Yes. Well, all of those women's movements were coming together towards the end of the 19th century. They overlapped so much. The suffrage movement, the temperance movement, the founding of women's clubs, the CLSC, even women in the Sunday school movement were parts of all of these other movements.
Should we show this
going
book?
on. Oh, yeah.
On the camera there? Can you get it, guys? Oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
How'd you find the artist?
It was a lithograph that I found in the CLSC archives. The original painting is owned by Shirley Lemon Cuso, and Barbara Stewie is a friend of hers from Lockport. And so I got in touch and said, can we use this? And both of them were delighted. So the original painting is at Shirley Lemon Cuso's house.
And the little stool that you've brought, and maybe something else in that bag I see, but tell us, for those, particularly those who are not members of a CLSC class, kind of how the process evolves.
You join a class, and there you read 12 books, 3 books a year over 4 years. Now some people pay all their dues for 4 years and read them all in 1 year, whatever. But once you do that, one of the things, because in the 1880s and 1890s, people wanted to keep reading. They wanted to keep going. So they made these different levels of reading. And the one that stuck was called the Guild of the Seven Seals. And it is sort of the graduate department of the CLSC. And now this was instituted by a man named Bob Thomas in, about 2005 or so. And there are 4 of these. I'm still working on my 4th one. But you have to read 14 more books to get this one, 26 more books to get this one, another 26 for this, and then another 48 for the last one.
And they have Greek names? Each of them have Greek names?
Well, this is the Guild of the Seven Seals. That's the original. This is the Order of the White.
Oh, it's okay. I'm impressed that you brought it with you.
And this is, well, this is called the Parnassians order, and then the Olympians is the last part of it. And there's even some talk about, yet again, adding yet another, because people keep reading. They like the books, and they keep reading, and so they want another thing. This other piece is just, because I'm a vice president for History and Tradition, on Recognition Day I wear this, and it also means that if they need me, I'm a parade marshal for the banners.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. Well, we can't, obviously your credentials are based on your being this author, are based on your abilities and your having worked at the Daily, cumulatively, how many years would you say?
Cumulatively about 14 years, but over several decades of time. It's about 7 years back in the 70s, and then it's been almost 7 years again.
People certainly know your byline, Mary Lee.
Yes, they do.
They know your byline. But I wanted to say before we sign off that it's much more than you know how to write. You know people, and you are in this pantheon of individuals, this rarefied air of people whose families have gone back longer than most. Yeah. I can think of a handful of people who have roots as deep as yours. And maybe you could talk for a moment about your great-grandfather.
My great-grandfather was brought to Chautauqua by his wife for their honeymoon in 1902. She'd started coming around 1898. And Samuel and Mary Hazlett loved Chautauqua and raised their children here. And he was an attorney from Pittsburgh, apparently argued some cases in front of the Supreme Court on municipal law. But when Chautauqua hit the Depression and it looked like they were going to close, property owners asked him to go to the trustees meeting in Buffalo. And he was the one that said, you know, I think we can pay off this debt that we owe. And so he was the leader of the Chautauqua Redevelopment Corporation and led the charge to pay off the debt. And then worked for a number of years as the executive vice president under Bester. And I'm not sure about Norton. I think he may have stayed on, and then became president of the institution from 47 to 56. So yeah, deep roots, and which is one of the reasons I wanted to come back here and to live here full time.
I love that you're so immersed in the community year-round that I don't see you just in the summer. I'm sure that if I'm not going to see you in the summer, I will run into you at meetings of things that mean a lot. I mean, activism in its various ways.
Well, I'll just mention the AAUW What's New Fair, where we raise scholarship money for local women who are graduating from JCC to go on for a 4-year degree, and I've been involved in that for about 8 years. And
that's a great example of, again, where you should be.
I just love being able to help these women achieve their dreams.
Do you have other dreams? Another book coming along?
Well, actually, I edited the book on the Chautauqua streets, the streets where you live, and I'm now working again with those same authors, Arthur and Betty Saltz, who are writing the history of the Jewish presidents and the Hebrew congregation at Chautauqua, and I'm going to be editing that book.
Great.
And maybe that'll lead into something else.
I'm sure it will lead into something else. In the meantime, I'll see you walking Max, your dog,
Yes.
on the grounds. And
You will.
I wish you a very good and fun summer, as much as you can have fun when you're doing as much as you do. One, I suppose, last thing I'm wondering about is, I've heard a little bit about the possibility of an ice skating rink at the Hall of Philosophy. That have you heard anything about that?
At the Hall of Philosophy? No, I had heard on the Plaza.
I heard on the Plaza first, or was it that I heard? Yeah, I heard on the Plaza first, and then I heard that they might do it over at Hall of Philosophy because it would be covered. But then I was worried about
I would be worried about the tiles.
I was
exactly.
worried about the mosaics celebrating those classes.
Yes.
So I won't worry too much. If word hasn't gotten back to you, then I'm sure you'll defend whatever needs to be defended.
Yeah, I think that would. It's a nice idea, but
yeah,
it would be a disaster for the mosaics.
Thank you very much for spending time with us. I appreciate it. Mary Lee Talbot, the Reverend Mary Lee Talbot, PhD, and wonderful friend of the institution. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.